This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Whenever I get a new camera, there's 10 settings I always change. In today's video, I discuss these settings and why they are so important. So the settings I'm going to be talking about today are not camera brand specific, so you'll find these on most cameras, but these are really important settings that I like to change whenever I either rent or buy a new camera or borrow somebody else's. So these settings might be called something a little bit different to my camera, but I'll try to explain it, and then you can look in your menu or deep dive into your manual to find the settings for yourself. Now, I've hiked right from the bottom there down in the valley, and I'm heading up to the top of this hill here, which looks absolutely wonderful. Got some great cloud detail. There's a rainbow in the sky as well, which is pretty dramatic. But I want to try and keep this video on point. So I'm going to be talking about the settings as I walk up to the top here, and hopefully we'll get a nice sunset and we can grab a couple of images at the end of the video. So see you a bit further up the trail. A lot of cameras have a setting called long exposure noise reduction, which, as it says, reduces noise and long exposures. Now there's several issues with this. Firstly, it can take as long as the exposure itself to process. So if you're doing a 10-second exposure, for example, you could be waiting for a further 10 seconds before you can either view the image or take another photo. More importantly though, I found it's better to do any noise reduction in post-processing. I've had better results that way. So I always turn this feature off on my cameras. Maybe if you're shooting JPEG only and you don't want to post-process at all, then consider leaving it on, but I find it's just, it just wastes time in the field. So for me, it's a setting I always turn off. Next, we have instant photo review. Now, not all cameras have this, but if you're seeing the image you've just taken appear on your screen straight after you've taken the shot, then you'll have this activated on your camera. Now, I always turn this off as I might want to take another shot straight away and prefer to choose when I want to review the images myself as opposed to have the camera do it automatically. So I always turn this feature off. I find it very distracting if I'm looking through the viewfinder, for example, on a mirrorless camera, and the image I've just taken is flashing up in the EVF. Anyway, let's move on to setting number 3. So this probably goes without saying, but if you want to get the most from your photos in post-production, shooting in RAW is definitely advisable. I've got my camera set to high quality JPEG and RAW, meaning I get a RAW photo and a JPEG saved to my card. So if I need to quickly share an image with someone, I can quickly send the JPEG. For most of my work though, it's always in RAW, as this, it gives me a lot more flexibility in post-production with exposure and white balance. If your camera has dual card slots like mine does on here, you can set one slot to record to RAW and the other to JPEG, so it keeps the two separate, and also you've got a backup should you need it. And that kind of helps with management when you get back to uploading your photos. So as we're talking about memory cards, it kind of leads on to the next point. A lot of cameras will have a setting called shoot without card, and this is something that's turned on by default on a lot of cameras, but I would definitely consider turning this off. Basically, having this switched on will allow the camera to take photos when there's no memory card in the camera. Meaning potentially you could be taking photos and not recording the data, which seems ludicrous to me, and I can't see a reason for having this switched on. So consider switching this one off to be on the safe side. Last thing you want is to get home and find you didn't record any data because you forgot to put a memory card in. So this is a really interesting spot. The rocky outcrop you can see on the side of the hill there is called Carton Arthur. And the little rocks that you can see on the summit on the ridgeline there are called Bed Arthur, and that's an elliptical stone circle which is said to be the resting place of the myth or legend King Arthur. And there seems to be a story on every hillside in this area. Pretty incredible. See what, the pollen count's so high I can barely see right now. Anyway, next up we've got choosing the right picture profile to suit your photography. Now I mentioned in a recent video about exposure, I think it was, that I like to flick between my natural live view and the baked in look. So the natural live view will give you very similar results to the RAW file, which helps to judge exposure, but being able to see nice colours and contrasts can really help compose a shot. So I've got my picture profile set to a very similar look to how things look naturally, you know, because that helps for me shooting landscapes. But if you shoot portraits, you might want to choose something that offers flattering skin tones, or if you're a black and white shooter, you know, you might want to select a black and white profile, as this will definitely help with your creativity and finding the right composition. So yeah, choosing the right picture profile is definitely a bonus with mirrorless cameras. Before we move on to the next point, here's a quick message from today's sponsor, Skillshare. I've been a member of the Skillshare community for over 3 years now, and during this time I've explored some incredible classes by some of the world's best teachers. Alongside some great photography content from the likes of Chris Burkhardt and Kyle McDougall, Skillshare has hundreds of career-focused classes too. Now, I've been a self-taught professional photographer for over 16 years now, and continue to be my own boss is really important to me, and learning new freelance tips is vital as I move forward. Recently I've taken Ali Abdul's class on productivity for creators, a class focused on managing time, attention and ideas. It's a great class and will certainly help anyone who is looking to freelance or start a side hustle of their own. So go ahead and achieve a new goal this year. The first 1,000 people to use the link in the description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So go take a look. A big thanks to Skillshare for supporting this week's video. So next up is the histogram. Now, most mirrorless cameras allow you to put the histogram on your LCD and in the EVF as well, and I find this most useful for judging exposure, so it's always on my LCD. I also have my RGB histogram set up to, when I flip my screen out, if I swipe down from the top there, the RGB histogram comes up on my LCD screen, which helps me fine tune in difficult lighting situations. So great to be able to toggle that on and off as well. So I always make sure I've got my histogram on my screen whenever I'm shooting with any camera. It's such a helpful tool. Right, we're about halfway I think now, so time to get to the top. Fingers crossed for the light. Ah, so cool up here. Love it. So I've got a shot up here that I really like the look of. I'm just going to quickly take it before we move on to the next setting, because the light's really quite diffused and nice right now. I think if the light's coming from that direction straight onto my subject, we're going to get some harsh shadows. So I'm pretty keen to take this image right now. I've got a circular polarizer on the front, and I was trying to set the tripod up, but I'm at about 60th of a second anyway at 16mm. I don't really need to use a tripod. It's just given me so much more flexibility to move around on these rocks without it. So it's a handheld shot. And I've been working on the relationship between the rocky outcrop there and this fern, just trying to get that balance, the relationship between the two just right. And I think I quite like this one actually. Right, let's concentrate. I think I got a shot in the end. I had to make some compromises, but I think it was okay. I'm going to head up there in a minute, see if I can get another shot. And it is very gloomy right now, but there is some cloud detail, so I'm hopeful we'll get another shot this evening once we rattle through these last camera settings. So let's jump straight into the next one. So I always map my level tool to a function button, and I've got mine on this little button in here. One press of that button and I can quickly see if I'm framing my shot up level, which is super helpful for landscapes. Nothing worse than getting back and realising you've got to crop into your image because you didn't get the horizon level lines right or something like that. So I always put my level onto a button, one press and it puts it on my LCD, another press it turns it off. Super quick, super easy, but definitely a great tool to have. Number 8 is grid lines. Now, when I'm shooting landscapes in particular, I have my rule of third grid lines switched on as a permanent setting on my LCD. This allows me to work within the rule of thirds should I wish. Now, I don't always stick to the rule of thirds, but it is nice to have it on there when I decide to work in that type of composition. It's really handy as well, say you're shooting seascapes and you want to make 2/3 sky, 1/3 water or vice versa. It's great just to quickly be able to see that on the back of your screen. So one click of the display back button and I get a clean view, so I don't get any of my settings. So should I wish to have an uncluttered view, I can quickly do that too. So next up, we've got the electronic first curtain or front curtain. Now, if you're not familiar with this setting, basically the shutter mechanism is made of two curtains, the front and rear. With the mechanical shutter activated, the first curtain will open and it will start the exposure. Then the second curtain will close and finish the exposure, basically. The downside to this is that sometimes when the front curtain opens, there's a small amount of vibration, and this can be recorded within the image, especially with a telephoto lens. With the electronic first curtain setting activated, the front curtain remains open and the exposure is started electronically, thus eliminating that vibration. The mechanical rear curtain then finishes the exposure, meaning we still get that nice mechanical sound of the shutter. Now, this is great for landscapes or when there's not a ton of movement in your photo, but do be aware that you might have issues with rolling shutter if you shoot sports or if you do a lot of panning, say cars coming by quickly and you're panning, you may get rolling shutter. So if you're doing something like that, it might be advisable to stick with the mechanical shutter. And the last setting I want to go through is turning off any lights or beeps on the camera. There's nothing worse than a beeping flashing camera when you're trying to take shots. The only beeps or lights that I have set up on my camera is for the 2-second and 10-second timer, and that's because quite often I'm doing thumbnails for videos and I have to run around the other side of the camera, and it's nice to know when it's going to take the shot. But everything else is turned off. There's nothing worse than beeps and flashes when you're out in the tranquil landscape like this. Anyway, let's go and see if we can get another image this evening. I'm pretty sure there's got to be another one around here. Some amazing compositions to be had amongst these rocks, just wonderful. It's getting quite nippy as well. Right, come on, onwards and upwards. It's virtually dark. It's about an hour before sunset, which is ridiculous. So I quite often say on my workshops or one-to-ones that it's better to have a great composition and poor light than it is to have great light with a poor composition. You know, it's much better, much more rewarding, isn't it, going home and seeing how you've created a composition that worked. Nothing worse than going home having had great light only to be disappointed with your composition. So yes, it's always better to work on that composition, and I think I've got a really strong composition here. I think what it really needs is some directional light coming through from the side, just casting some contrast on these boulders in the foreground, but it might work well as a black and white, so I'm going to experiment with that. Yeah, quite an interesting one this. Lots of zaggy lines running through the composition and a burst of colour with this heather. F9, half a second, ISO 125. Whilst the settings we've talked about today are something that I always change when I buy or rent a new camera, there's a ton of other settings that are important too. In this video up here, I'll discuss some of those other settings. Hope you got something from this video. If you did, please be sure to give the video a like. And if you fancy helping the channel out further, why not check out my zine? All of the proceeds will go towards reaching new locations like this beautiful place here. Until next week, guys, take care, and I'll see you all very soon.